as I was integrating this, it was easier for me to see other people's patterns than it was
Yeah.
for me to see mine. So I actually started practicing in phone calls. Like family has always called me as soon as I resonated with coaching. Like, oh, this makes so much sense. People have been calling and sharing, oversharing. People have overshared with me their entire lives. Now I've got like ways to navigate all of that.
Welcome to the Moxie Podcast. We are in the middle of the year, which is hard to believe. And when I was planning out 2024, I thought, what should we talk about in July? And something that just really struck my heart was when we get to the middle of the year, we start to evaluate how the year is going, maybe some of our New Year resolutions haven't gone exactly as we planned, and we're starting to see what does the end of the year entail, especially if we run businesses. We're looking at all of those stats. We're looking at what's next, and we're looking at can we make the year happen in the way that we still want it to happen? And so we're kind of coining this month midlife crisis, well, mid-year crisis, and kind of going off of those themes of what happens when we hit midlife. But I wanted to this month is actually really special for me because last week you got to hear from Kathy, who's the founder of Get Clarity, and you guys have heard a lot of the shift method from me over the last couple years and just how it's just greatly impacted my life. So I wanted it to be a really unique month and only bring on Get Clarity coaches and talk about all of the amazing methods that we get to use in our own life, but also how we apply that to other people. And so today I have Jen. It's Jen and Jen today. It's the J Squared show. Welcome to the Moxie Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm so happy that you are here. So we've already, if our listeners heard last week, they kind of know kind of the theme of what we're going on this month. But before we even get into that, I would love for people to know who you are, kind of what you're best known for, and when also Get Clarity entered your life, and how, when you took next steps to that and started using it.
Yeah, I love it. I am Jen Roth, and I have built an herbal tea company for fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum. I was also introduced to clarity about the same time that I had that vision coming through me. I had a previous employer bring me to, I was doing massage therapy, specifically perioperative at that time, and had also done some fertility work previously, but my main focus was in women's health. And I had a vision to create a global tea company focused in those areas, and found myself in a clarity workshop, fully thinking about my life in a new and different way. You and I have talked about this before, and part of what we do as clarity coaches is lead people through a lights on retreat, and a lights on interview. And during that interview process, we take a before photo and we take an after photo. And I had seen some before photos in the workshop and knew that that's where I was in my life, just not fully fulfilled, not completely sparked, like more exhausted than I wanted to be. So it's fun to have the conversation about exhaustion and anxiety today with you too, and have that as the focus. And knew I wanted to be a more energized person and version of myself, and that was a possibility. The other thing that was super interesting for me was that the woman, Kathy, who you had on recently, who developed and created clarity tools, was standing at the front of the room helping people bring their dreams to fruition and live their most lights on, expansive life. And I thought, oh my goodness, wouldn't that be the coolest job in the whole entire planet? So, in the process of going through and learning the clarity tools and building birds and bees teas in the blending room, I was constantly using the tools and having conversations and working people out of jobs, because I was way more interested in what really lit them up and what they came here to do and what they wanted to do
Yeah.
in this life than blending tea. So it was a fun place for collaboration and community and that sort of thing. But I quickly found myself being a clarity coach and going through that process. So currently that is what is the most, what I spend most of my time doing and where my heart is the fullest. And it doesn't, I don't always have my coaching hat on, and I'm constantly asking people if they could do anything they wanted, what would it be? And that could be shifting your day to day, right? And how we're
Mhm.
operating the day. It doesn't have to be a huge pivot into some new reality for you. So it's fun having those conversations and diving deep with people. I love diving deep with people.
I love it. One of my favorite parts of the training is just like the very beginning when it's like we talk about that you can change your mindset in like 125th of a second. Cause I'm just like, to me, that every time I teach it, it just, and every time I say that sentence, I'm like, it's that quick. Like we have the choice to do it that quick. And I used to always be one of those people that was like, oh, well, this is a crappy day. We're going to wait till tomorrow, and it's just like, and then there's another tomorrow. And then I keep pushing it back and pushing it back until I just feel like, yeah, I'm just stuck. And so it's just been a joy to be able to put words to it. And recently in the beginning of this year was teaching, um, the shift method virtually, and just talking through those emotions. And as I was planning out the podcast and really thinking about, having you on here and talking through just your journey, especially in exhaustion anxiety. And that's why I'm just so thrilled for you to even kind of talk through how you worked through that in your path and in the way you've built businesses and the way, just even in your family structure as well. Just your personal testimony really of it is that I feel like these emotions, I mean, like being unmotivated, being stuck and whatnot too happen obviously quite often, but in within an entrepreneur sphere, if we allow it. But I think this exhaustion anxiety, especially the anxiety part for me is when cue children, like motherhood happened. It was like, oh, this is like a whole nother, like a whole nother level of things going on. So would love to talk through that as we're in the middle of the year, right? And if I want to get to the practical advice, but I want to start with your story of because you talk about building, your tea company, you talk about, this moment of feeling exhausted. When did you realize that, like, when were you able to put words of like, oh, wow, I'm exhausted and I am feeling anxious? Because I think sometimes it happens and we are just not even aware it's happening because we're just so in it, when it's first over, like when it's consuming.
Yeah, I'd say there's two kind of key times in my life. One was building my massage practice and working with that team and doing that modality, and coming home and physically being exhausted, emotionally and mentally being exhausted,
Mm-hmm.
holding space for other people, not really having tools and resources like the clarity tools to separate whose
Mm-hmm.
energy is what. Women that were not being able to get pregnant and going through that whole entire thing, like I would sit there and cry. Like I was just, my heart was breaking open every single day. And now having the clarity tools, I truly can hold my own field and listen from an empathetic place and not jump in the river with them, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like this beautiful ability to build this resilience and that sort of thing. But it was, I feel like it was also the weight of people pleasing at that moment. And that also came up in Birds and Bees Teas of feeling like I needed to network, feeling like I needed to be always doing something and constantly burning the candle at all ends. And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
this is not sustainable. Yeah, I'm coming home, I'm absolutely exhausted. And I would look into the future and think, holy heck, if I have to do this, get to do this for the rest of my life, I'm going to be so tired. Like, no wonder people
Yeah.
are not happy and go home and watch TV for hours and totally numb out and check out. Like it, and that's not, I have like such an exuberant, excitable, passionate energy in me. So that was not feeling aligned at all. And then the other time was in Birds and Bees Teas of, there was a lot of networking happening in Denver at the time. And I felt like I needed to keep up and be going to everything. whether it was aligned with the marketing of the company or not, whether they were pregnant moms or, serving that population or not. And when I finally took a deep breath and thought, like, what do I want to do during my day? And how do I really intentionally want to operate this business? It was a major, major shift. And I love that you're talking about this now at this point, especially for moms, is it's
Mm-hmm.
not like just work, right? Now you have summer vacations, you have kids out of school, like the exhaustion and anxiety
Yeah.
levels have spiked to a whole new planet, right? We're trying to make it all work.
Yeah. I didn't even think of that, Jen. Yeah, this is landing right during like summer, and now you're probably hoping schools is starting, like you're counting down the days already at school. Oh, yeah. I recently, so when this episode will be coming out to you guys, yeah, it will be after we've been on the road for a long time. And so as I was prepping myself to be on the road, I've done this multiple times. But I remember I can just like close my eyes and place myself back in 2021. And and I will say, I did not start actively using clarity tools to my advantage to like it was probably around 2021. So introduced to it in 2018. That's when I started working with Kathy and, getting familiar with it, but didn't really start like carrying around this everywhere, carrying around like just understanding it. And so I remember in 2021, I'm sitting in the RV and I have a 1-year old, 3-year old, and a 5-year old. So by this time, I can't tell you how I'm feeling now because we are recording before this RV trip is happening this year. So, but already know, I already know how I felt. And we had a nanny. That was a whole thing. I'm not even going to bring that into the podcast, because it wasn't a good thing. And it wasn't, anyways, it was a whole thing. But it was overwhelming to be in a small space, to try to be working and to um be taking care of my 3 kiddos plus this nanny. So this time moving into the RV, currently we don't have a nanny situation, not because we didn't try, guys. We have tried to find the perfect nanny for the road, but nothing has felt in alignment. And I told myself my kids come first and I'm not gonna budge. And so I've already told my husband, like we're about to be on the road in 2 weeks. So DM me after you hear this podcast because I've already gone through it. But right now I'm mentally preparing myself because I'm like, okay, this is gonna happen. I'm gonna be on a meeting. We're gonna like lose service. Then the kids are gonna be like screaming in the background, and I'm just gonna have to like control my energy and like be okay. Everything's gonna be okay. Like it's gonna be all right. So like I'm already trying to mentally prepare myself. But I think what's beautiful is I just feel so much more like emotionally, mentally, like I just all holistically prepared for the trip. So I know there's going to be moments, right, of that frustration, but it's in that I also know in that frustration and that transition, like that I can still move above the line and be like, okay, it's okay. We're going to laugh about this. It's going to be fine, and take that other approach versus just immediately like being anxious and then immediately being, kind of getting that like those emotions that I don't want my kids to see, I mean, I want them to see me work through them in a really healthy way. But when I look back at that 2021 trip, there were so many moments that were not healthy and not happy. And it was a fun trip with a lot of a lot of those emotions in between. So I think one, as mothers, I would put the message out that we need to give all ourselves grace in the moment. But I think when we can equip ourselves with tools and language and as we talk about like a near field and a supportive field that is like really there for us, it changes the game with how we can move out of that exhaustion and out of that anxiety and out of that fear or whatever that might be. And so I would love for you, especially with putting your clarity coach hat on, when someone comes to you and they're completely lights off, and we've seen those pictures, right? They're completely lights off and they're really dull and they don't know how they're going to take the first step forward. What are some just, practical steps that they can start with, to start to, get their light a little brighter, but also just to like step into those day to days because as we know, it's not an overnight thing. Like this is a long, it's a process and it's a practice and it continued patterns that we have to work on. So I would love, yeah, to hear some advice and maybe how you even started to work out of that as well.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I have a few clients right now who are fairly stuck in swirling in eddies, and it's the consistent reminder of helping them tap into their light, right? And helping them remember what the light is when we're in exhaustion and when we're in anxiety. So often we can't necessarily see that. So tapping in and making sure we have a sister or someone that we can reach out to and have a conversation with that will feed that back to us, I feel like is so important. Ideally a coach or someone who is well versed in this and practiced a bit more so that we
Mm-hmm.
can recognize patterns together, and you don't always need a coach to make that happen. What I love about the clarity tools is you can literally like download them and begin coaching yourself. And I think that that's one of the key things that you were asking too, is what did I do to start shifting? Because it's really the awareness, right? It's paying attention. And a little bit ago, you said it used to happen for a whole day, a negative thought or a feeling of focusing on the overwhelm, maybe, and focusing on the exhaustion, leading that energy from dripping from one experience into the next, into the next, into the next. And then that snowballs into 2 or 3 days. So when we recognize where we are and shift a thought or shift a practice, I love putting on a song that you really love and dancing it out, like dance it out like as much as you possibly can for 5 minutes, like just change your state, right? Like shift the
Mm-hmm.
energy. It'll help us realign back to ourself. And then mentally we'll have a stronger opportunity to actually hold a positive field. Is when that negative feedback loop is kicking in our body, the pharmaceuticals we've given ourselves those internal
Mm-hmm.
pharmaceuticals, and they're challenging to stop when things aren't really headed in the direction that we want. We keep focusing on that, and then we'll create another one and create another one. And it is just as simple to switch in that 125 thousandths of a second over to the positive. And then we get to remember over and over and over again, what is it that I want to focus on? And so often when we're in a negative feedback loop or we're in exhaustion, we're in anxiety, we're asking ourselves the question, why, over and over? Why is this happening to me? I can't believe this is another thing that just happened. Why isn't
Mm-hmm.
the nanny the most ideal and aligned? Why are the kids screaming, right? And that'll lead to a justification of because, and we'll tell ourselves a story and we'll believe it. So that's not necessarily helpful. When we can begin to recognize that we're doing that, then we can start to switch the script a bit, right? And play with different thoughts, play with other energy. And I would say if dancing isn't one of your things, then finding pockets of joy and pockets of gratitude, is it can be challenging as well. Like in the clarity resources, we ask for people in exhaustion to think about excitement. Well, that can be really challenging if you haven't been on the yoga mat every day. If you're only doing yoga once a month, then every single time you go to do yoga, it's going to feel like possibly the first time, right? And those
Right.
muscles aren't like well oiled and conditioned. Same thing with our mind. So if we're remembering daily, then the likelihood of us shifting that pattern and habit is so much stronger. And same thing for exhaustion, or exhaustion to excitement, anxiety to enthusiasm. And we can take that anxiety sometimes. And if we are dancing it out, then it can come into enthusiasm quickly too. And we can feel the minute difference. Because anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
enthusiasm
Yeah.
aren't really that different.
Yeah. Yeah. Where would you say on when you started? Well, I would just love to know even your business journey too, in both like when you're, running your massage company and then also in your teas and I just feel like you're very multifaceted and we're barely touching the surface. So, and all the things, Jen, like where would you say that you started to see the difference, not just like maybe, yeah, in your life, like in your relationships, but also in your business? when you started to actually start like to be intentional with understanding and the awareness? Because as we know, I mean, it really starts with just like being aware that you can make these shifts, right? And being, so conscious of that. And then obviously the practice of it and continued practice. But where are some areas that you started to see those changes, um, like again in your near field and things that you were a part of?
Yeah, I love that you say near field too, because I don't know about you, but as I was integrating this, it was easier for me to see other people's patterns than it was
Yeah.
for me to see mine. So I actually started practicing in phone calls. Like family has always called me as soon as I resonated with coaching. I'm like, oh, this makes so much sense. People have been calling and sharing, oversharing. People have overshared with me their entire lives. Now I've got like ways to navigate all of that. So
So
I
good.
would take some of these words, let's say exhaustion and excitement and anxiety and enthusiasm, and I'd start listening in conversations with people when they would use the word exhaustion, when they would use the word anxiety. And I was able to recognize it faster and faster. I was able to do that with my teams that I was working on. I was able to do it with my spouse too. Him and I um, we started our businesses at the same time. I'm so excitable. And I'm like, oh, you could do this, you could do that, you could do this. It's knocking his lights out all the time. And we were in a fairly rough pattern in place. And one of the things that I did for myself, but also for him, was continuously asking myself the question of what would love do in this moment, and pausing for like, oh, maybe my business isn't as far along as I thought, or whatever I tried didn't end up working. And I get to go choose again. What would love do in that moment for myself? What would love do in greeting my husband when he's been working all night long and I would prefer him to be at home, or choosing something that might be more healthy? Um, it's for him to live out, not for me. Right. And so
Right.
we get to come together in a powerful partnership where we're able. And so the other thing was I started to listen more and not be sharing as often. I always have ideas and thoughts and excitement about how someone else could be doing something. So often people want to be heard, right? The same thing with ourselves. So those are a couple ways that I started incorporating specifically the clarity tools, a handful of other things like meditation and that sort of thing, but really beginning to figure out and have the awareness of, what am I thinking? What am I saying? What are the words that I'm choosing to say? And helping people with their words. So when I would notice or hear something about anxiety, be like, oh, I'm super curious what you could do to create excitement in your world this week, or what could you do
Mm.
to energize yourself, right, from the exhaustive place. And it could be one simple thing that somebody gets to put on their calendar. And then ideally, it's us refocusing that on ourselves. So we get to
Yeah.
begin to catch our own thoughts and our own things. And I started using, I don't remember exactly where it came from, but a couple girlfriends and I had gone through, I had taken them through the clarity training. So our language was all shifting together, and we came up with this thing of catch, cancel, correct, and or shift. So catch the word that we're thinking or that we heard ourselves say. But trying and can't are some fun ones to play with right out of the gate. And then cancel those thoughts and
Yeah.
course correct them, shift them to something different.
Yeah, I love that. I think you become when you start to work, yeah, I like how you said that. When you are like, okay, I know I need this, but then it's so interesting what you start to catch, yeah, from your near field and other things. And again, we can't change it, but we can support in so many ways. Words are so powerful. So I'm a words of affirmation love language. So tell me how awesome I am, and I'm gonna like light up all the time. I just did this like weekend event, and I do a like affirmation circle, and I'm like, you have to say one word about everyone, and everyone gets super uncomfortable when you're making eye contact and saying a word, and it's still somewhat uncomfortable for me, but at the end of the day, I'm like, I did that affirmation circle for me because I just wanted to hear all the, all this. But yeah, I think words are so powerful, but I also love how you talked about listening. Um, I feel like I've become such a better, I call it radically listening, but active listening, just such a better listener and then not imposing my own opinions as well, like of just like being and hearing instead of like, I remember when I was younger, I would just automatically like stop listening and be like, this is how I want to respond. Like, shut up so I can respond type thing. And it's just like, I don't remember the last time that behavior has happened, right? It's just like, no, I'm here and I want to hear you and I want to be. Um, and I think those practices too are so great for people who are going through even like really hard times in life where we can be that friend and show up. I've had some friends go through some really, really hard loss in their life. And I knew I didn't have to fill the space with words, that I could just be. And I think that, in clarity, when we talk about like our personal, that was another thing for me, learning about my personal energy. And how, I mean, I knew I affected a room. Like if I was pissed, like I knew I affected everyone around me. And I was like, okay about it when I was younger. I was like a force, but I'm like, I love that I'm a force for like radiant good now, like a very different energy in place. But I also love knowing that I mean, we can step in a room and not say one word and hold like such a strong energy, and like people are going to gravitate towards that. In fact, that's like the origin story when I talk about meeting Kathy, because I was speaking at an event, a conference. I had my daughter was 5 months old, 4 months old, maybe, Sophie. And I don't even think she said one word. I just like saw her across the room. Like, we were all having lunch and I was like, I need to know who that is. Like she just, had that presence. And, it's so cool when you can start to see that happen in your own life, but then also when you teach it and you see people start to get it and start to have that internal self-efficacy growth and confidence and really light up a room without, having to say one word. So it is truly powerful.
Yeah, it's completely the attraction model, right? Of
Right.
being so aligned with who you are. I can remember wanting so badly to help so many people and think that I had something in me to give them. And it all came from a genuine place. And now walking in and observing and taking in the energy and feeling the energy of a room, holding space. Whenever we do a training, we often have, especially an in-person training, a logistics person, and their main job is to hold the room, like hold the space, the energy of the entire room. And I feel like that's something that's really missing from a lot of meetings and a lot of other things is the intentionality. We don't
Mm-hmm.
always have to be heard. We don't always need to be speaking. And in coaching, it's a blast because once we learn how to become a stronger observer, so many of the questions that we have that are like, I can't wait to ask this,
Mm-hmm.
I'll write them down. But so often, just by staying quiet and continuing to listen, the
Yeah.
answers to those questions come flying through, and they're from you or
Mm-hmm.
whomever is being asked the question instead of or sharing, right? Um, Instead of it coming from the outside. So when it
Right.
comes from our inside and we're bubbling with the answer, it always is fun. It's like, is it the magic of the energy, the connection between the two people? Is it truly like whatever? I don't know. We're getting out of our own way. So we don't need to be imposing our thoughts and
Yeah.
emotions on someone else's thing. Yeah. The lights on energy interview is so fun because we open with, if I'm Santa Claus and you could have anything you wanted, what would it be? And you're the one that directs it, not
Mm-hmm.
us. Like there's no specific question. It's really, you get to have anything you want. And so from wherever that opening door is, that's where we continue to lead. So it's such a blast.
Yeah. It's so good. Last thing I'll talk about, because just being a woman of faith, I found it and I think we talked about this actually in the last kind of, I don't know, were we called a cohort? People, my little cohort who learned chef method together. We talked about this, that it's like when you start to talk about energy and you start to talk about your body, when you grow up in a strong faith foundation, as I grew up in, it's like this weird topic to bring it into your conversation. So I know probably even some of my listeners this month are like, wow, we're getting like really deep in this topic. But I love it because like God made us with a beautiful vessel and this is our body and we should know everything about it. It's so powerful. When you can, I always say, when you can actually understand how we were created and actually ask yourself about this amazing tool, our brain, and actually know our thoughts, like it's like, we say lights on and then I'm like, you add a foundation of faith. It's like an LED super light. Because it's just like you finally understand um yeah, your fullest capacity. Not that you didn't before, but it's just this, we can call it woo, but it's weird how kind of this religious institutions will take this type of what this Eastern thought process and make it what's the word, like a bad thing, like a bad thing to learn about. And I think there's so much history and knowledge and truth. And when you can take both of them with open hands and come with curiosity and learn, it's amazing versus being put in a box and in a system and kind of oppressed is kind of a strong word, but in that, and so I say all of that to kind of wrap up our time too, because I want to encourage those listening that if you are in that space, because I am a strong believer. And when you are, walking that path, that can be, that can feel complicated. Like, am I doing wrong and whatnot? And that's a weird question to ask, but it is this like what we're prescribed to think. I'm not going to say we're brainwashed. That's the wrong word. I'm using all the wrong terminology right now. But when you're prescribed to think in a certain way, it's like, oh, what can I learn and how can I apply this? And so I just encourage people to yeah, to be curious and to learn. Like we are supposed to have expansive thought and to be able to vision and be able to go after that. And the biggest like stopper is ourself with the limiting belief that we put in front of us. And so I just encourage people to be curious. Do you have that often with your clients where they feel a little bit apprehensive in the beginning of kind of understanding like what are these tools? Like just curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a for some, yes,
Yeah.
100%. And for others who have been on the personal growth and development journey and those who have been diving incredibly deep into their faith and doing the research and
Yeah.
really, really care about it a ton. I feel like those people are so aligned that it clicks immediately, right? It makes
Right.
a ton of sense. And for those of us who maybe weren't given this opportunity earlier on or have a bit more of judgment that we're carrying around about right and wrong, like the fun part about what you just pulled in is it does take a time to assimilate the tools and for us to cellularly understand what
Yeah.
we're doing. And once that happens, it it's profound. It's so fun to see the expansion of the tools and really for me it's I feel like divine source energy that is the gate is open, right? Like our
Mhm.
channel is getting cleared in a way of taking the cobwebs out, removing Satan, possibly. I don't know fully, right? On
Mhm.
all of the proper way of stating some of these things. But when we're building our internal confidence and recognizing what works for us and what we came here and God put us on this planet to do, that's our own unique gift,
Mhm.
then we get to turn the volume up and it becomes this massive gift to everyone, which is totally what I believe. And I also think that there's this gift that we get to give ourselves of removing judgment, but I believe that that's what Jesus came here for, which is to like spread light and love into this world and
Mhm.
help us to remove judgment. And there's some conditioning around a lot of that we get to unravel and unwind. And what if we are able
Yeah.
to live without right and wrong, that there's more effective ways of doing things and less a way of doing things. Don't get me like there are definitely wrongs, I feel like, in the world to a certain extreme, right?
Mhm.
But for what we're all, most of us are attempting to do on a day-to-day basis, if we have the capacity, when we have the capacity to remove right and wrong, when we have the capacity to remove judgment and to tap into source energy. It's the sweetest thing I've ever experienced.
Yeah. And I would say it also, and I'm sure you can speak to this too, it also creates like so much disjointed. Like there's, I feel like in my life that I felt like everything was compartmentalized a little bit and disjointed. The reality is they were like 1 degree off, like from each other of in alignment. Like everything I was doing was like meant to be in full alignment, but it was just like something was just a little off. And it has been the most beautiful thing to, so when people, they'll be like, wow, you do a lot. And I'm like, I, well, yes, but it's, to me, it's just, it's all in alignment, right? It's like, but I'm literally talking about the same thing all the time, just maybe in different hats like that I'm putting on, but it's the same thing. Like I'm representing the same thing. So I think when you're value based and you're self-aware and you start to add these tools, and then it's just like everything comes in alignment, because also, yeah, in the bridge plan and all the other tools, that we throw in there, it's, you learn your best yeses and you learn your best nos, and you start to like, yeah, truly having clarity walking forward. So I think that's been the most fun. And yeah, so cool to see is just like how everything that seemed doing the same stuff, but like 5 years ago seems so far apart. Now is just like fully in alignment and meshed together, and beautiful. And so I think that's really cool when you can see that over years, start to transform in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. The plants are fully blossoming or becoming in a new season of being able to see the leaves in a new way, shape, and form, right? And you could only see a couple of the seeds previously, and now you're getting to see more of the garden of
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah. Getting clear on what it is that energizes us and what we want to say yes to and what we want to say no to, and then finding the courage to say no, thank you when something's not aligned, is that could be the simplest start of where you can begin the work.
Yeah.
The courage to say yes and the courage to say no.
Yeah. So we could talk for hours. That's the truth. So we again are in the middle of the year. So if you guys are counting down the day for a school to come back, hang in there if your mama's listening. Jen, I would love for people to know where they can find you, how they can get in touch. So let us know that. And then we always love to end our episode with what is one last thing to live by, so we can leave this episode and go into the week with just some inspiration.
Yeah. You can find me at jenclaireroth.com. We have some gifts over at jenclaireroth.com/gift. Some courses that are diving into a little bit more of what we've been talking about today, and the Choice Point Guide, which is I call also the word guide for those who have never been able to see it visually. Where you're probably like, what in the heck are you two talking about?
Well, for those on YouTube, since we do have video, this is what we're talking about. It's like this really cool guide. Go check it out. Both Jen and I have different resources that you can find. Reach out to us, DM us. We can help you.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. And something to live by, I would say, are the miracles and the nuggets, like the moments in between. So often I feel like I've been striving for the big wins and all of the main successes in this lifetime and in this season of my life. What I'm really, really appreciating and what I want to last longer than anything else is my appreciation for the moments in between the big wins and all the little things that happen every single day that lead up to those, full of gratitude and full of appreciation. So I feel like the more we do that, then the essence of life gets better and better and better.
So good. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Jen, for joining us today. I need to get some water. Jen knows I've been talking for a long time for all of you guys to have great content. So, well, that is the Moxie podcast. We're so, so happy that you guys were able to join us today. And as I always say, Moxie on.